So, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you guys for taking time today to make yourself available for this call. I know calendar slots don't typically give up easy. So today we have about 45 minutes to go through the content, and I want to make sure we're making good use of our time. Today is really, this session is going to be focused on a shift about what's going on across the industry with respects to finance. So what we're planning on covering is not something that's a futuristic state. It's something that decision makers and IT leaders are making today. So there are decisions that are centered around how you're running your close, how leaders are getting visibility into the data that they need, and where AI can play in all of this, what it's starting to do, and how it's finishing work that used to take your team days to complete. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So just some brief background. My name is Nikhil Singh. I'm joined by Alex Waddell. Both Alex and I have spent the majority of our time with finance and operations leaders who have been kind of navigating how do they start modernizing how their teams work and what that looks like. So this entails getting off of processes and tools that were really built in a different era, right? They're a bit antiquated now, and we're starting to talk about how do we move towards models where the systems are giving us the data and the insights that we need to make decisions that are important for our business instead of just storing transactions. So if anyone here has questions following the sessions, feel free to reach out to myself or to Alex. We have our LinkedIn profiles here. Happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. And just in case you guys have missed it, VistaVu has been running multiple webinars over the last few months, and we also plan on having more moving forward. Most recently, we did a From Reactive to Predictive session by my colleague, William Houth. If you're interested in going through these sessions because you missed them, at the end of the presentation, we'll give you guys some details on how you can reach out for those session recordings. So for today's session, we're going to start with pretty much what outside business pressure is driving your finance modernization right now. So some of this I think will feel very familiar to you. If not, good on you. Then we're going to get into what capabilities can help you start addressing some of these problems. Things like a unified data foundation, smarter, faster close processes, and real-time analytics. We've also found time in today's sessions to carve out a few minutes for some live demos to give you guys a look and feel of how these solutions can start bridging gaps within your organization. And at the end of the session, we're going to close with, where AI is changing the landscape for finance leaders. And, obviously throughout the presentation, if you guys have questions, just make sure you're leveraging that Q&A function at the top. And, we'll try to answer those questions as fast as possible. If we do miss some of your questions before the session runs out, we'll make sure we get those answers out to you after the session concludes. Alrighty. So let me start all of this with something that will hopefully sound a bit familiar to you. So half of our finance teams today are taking more than 6 days to close their books, which might sound surprising, but the industry is always talking about, hey, a 3 to 5 day close, like it's a standard thing. It's something that every organization should be doing. The truth is only 18% of our organizations are actually achieving that target. So for most teams, the close is a hectic sprint at month end. You're doing manual reconciliations, you're getting data from separate sources and trying to compile that all into one location. And by the time you've done all of that and you've completed your numbers and you've handed it over to your leadership team, the chances are those numbers are still outdated because the environment that we are living in is moving so quickly. So the cost of that is quite substantial and it impacts the business. So when your close is taking 10 days, you're potentially going into board meetings, investor meetings with data that's already outdated. You're making decisions on data that was from last month's picture, and it's shifting again week to week, especially with the geopolitical climate that we're in today. Some of the other things that finance leaders are moving towards is the pressure is really coming from the outside in. So we're having changes in our industry where, ECC customer base, for instance, that's on SAP ECC, mainstream maintenance is ending in 2027. If you're on an ERP today that's not ECC, it's possible that you're on an ERP that you have outscaled. It's no longer fitting your business needs. It's struggling to keep up. So what we're starting to see is that this conversation has shifted from, hey, should we be moving over? Should we be modernizing our processes? To now coming to how fast can we do this? How quickly can we start recognizing our investment? How quickly can we start improving our processes? So organizations that are starting their transition now, moving into Cloud ERP Public Edition, they're starting to get much more time on that runway for a capability ramp. So this is talking to what the industry is going towards today, right? So if a lot of ECC customers and legacy customers are starting to move into this new wave of ERP, eventually it's going to get to the point where if you are waiting too long, you're going to have more competition with resources. There's going to be a supply and demand pull, and there's going to be less time for your organization to start building and bringing in better adoptions to new standard processes. So what we're eventually seeing is the move to public cloud isn't just a tech decision. It's starting to be a decision and choice about how you want your finance teams to start operating. So how does Cloud ERP solve these problems? So first, it's a standardized process model. So on the left, one of the hidden costs of really customized systems is every upgrade is a project. You're retesting, you're revalidating, and you're implementing customizations to fit your business needs. And this all takes time, and it obviously takes money. So where Cloud ERP is changing this is it comes out of the box with over 900 standard processes. So with organizations adopting best practices, finance processes, for instance, innovations coming continuously from what's being pushed down from the publisher and SAP without disruption to your business, and you're always being able to leverage that new functionality. The second set that's kind of helping with that works with our standardized business processes is all of this is working together by design. This isn't systems that are bolted together. It's for some examples of that would be like your unified financial data model and your advanced close engines. These are strong bases for your organizations to start leveraging. And then once they have your business processes flushed out and standardized and consistent, this is where you can really start tapping into that value where AI can stand on top of all of this. So your AI will be grounded in your financial data and not just a generic layer. It's not just a generic, AI tool off the side that you can query to help with some basic business problems. It's there to help you make better informed decisions faster, realizing through your data. So we're going to take a few minutes. We're going to walk through some of the core finance foundation functions. We'll do a demo of one of those core finance foundation functions. And then after that, we're going to get into how some of these AI functions can start driving this value in your business today. So the Universal Journal is essentially the foundation, and it's worth spending a few moments here to talk about what makes this different and why it's important to your business. So in your traditional ERPs, you've got financial accounting, you have cost accounting, you've got asset accounting, and these are all separate, but they all talk to each other. They don't always live in the same place either. So that is where you find yourself in your month-end closes, where that gap is where all of your reconciliations are living. That's where all of that work comes from. And your finance team is spending tons of time every month to make sure that those three things all agree before you can get to your close. So that's a very big time, a lot of time that you're spending, reconciling three major portions of your business to make sure they're all in alignment for your close. And where that Universal Journal is starting to bridge the gap and collapsing a lot of those issues is every transaction, whether it's a vendor invoice, as a cost allocation, or a fixed assets depreciation run, all of this is posting in real time across all three dimensions simultaneously. This gives you the ability to practically make decisions right there on the fly. There is no reconciliation needed because there's nothing to reconcile. It's all there on your universal journal. So what this means for you is you can run your analytics directly out of the system, no extracts needed. The CFO can pull the margin by their business unit, cost center performances, or even asset values without having to wait for batch jobs, reaching out to IT to gather this data and pull it all together. So the data model will end up becoming simpler, the system runs faster, and because of that, your close becomes shorter because you're not spending those last 2 days every single month chasing down those intercompany differences as well. It's a very simple idea. It's a financial truth, but operationally, it's something that makes a major difference to your business when it comes to your month-end close. And speaking about closing, the close, like I've been mentioning, is where we spend a lot of time and a lot of pressure lives on the finance teams throughout the year and throughout each period. So for most organizations, that problem is an effort. It's not the effort needed always. It's the sequencing. It's the manual tasks and dependencies that we have to get these things completed so we can get to our close. And where advanced financial close is addressing this is through three main things. First is continuous accounting. So distributing close work throughout the period instead of compressing everything into the last 3 days. So that's always a good thing, right? Sometimes we're naturally procrastinators by nature. Having something that is helping you close your work throughout your period rather than towards the tail end is going to help your teams become much more efficient. The second thing is you're going to be parallel processing tasks. Running tasks simultaneously rather than in sequence can help cut your cycle times meaningfully. And then the third would be your automated task orchestrations. So with that, the system's triggering the right steps at the right times for your resources and with built-in controls and audit trails for your auditability. What's interesting about closing is there's a benchmark that the top companies will close in under 5 days. We talked about that earlier. And automation tends to be the biggest differentiator in whether or not companies can hit that target. So research has actually shown that financial close automations reduce your cycle times by 30 to 50%. So that practical benefit isn't just speed, it's when you're closing faster, you're able to reduce the number of post-close adjustments that you're running, you're improving the accuracy in the data, and you're giving your leadership insight to valuable data points while that period is still in motion, not after the fact. So this is enabling leaders and decision makers to make faster decisions, smarter, and in line with the data that is coming in real time. And obviously, this all gets a little more complex when you have organizations that have multiple entities. That becomes even more valuable because the manual consolidation process across all of these entities can push cycle days to even 15 days or more. So when you're running a parallel close, this is giving you, again, more unified data and that you can make these decisions a lot faster. And speaking about multiple entities, the third place is visibility, right? So this is where, SAP Public Cloud is really starting to drive, a lot of value into organizations. So the visibility, and this is where I see the biggest shift in where finance teams are operating today to where they're moving into. So traditional reporting, if we think about it, has like its own built-in problems. So your data might live in your ERP, but then when you want to get it into reports, you're either pulling it into a staging layer, whether that's a data warehouse or an outside Excel spreadsheet for some organizations, and then you're taking that data, putting it into a reporting tool, and then that data eventually gets back to whoever asked the original question. If you think about that, it normally probably takes a few days to get that done, if at the very least. So by the time you receive that data, is it still relevant to where your business is today? So what we end up seeing is teams are spending much more time on data prep instead of data analysis and data review, right? So spreadsheets will start filling gaps in systems. And as we've all probably experienced, hey, your spreadsheet looks different than mine. And when that starts to happen, you have inconsistency in reporting, you have inconsistency in decision makings. You always want to be making decisions based on the best data that you have available. And when we run manual processes and spreadsheets are filling gaps, it muddies the water to allow us to make those informed decisions. So embedded analytics within S4 is going to remove a lot of this entirely. So reports and dashboards, they run directly on top of that universal journal data that we talked about recently. There's no extract. You don't have to replicate data. There's no latency. So there's a variance that shows up this morning. You're going to see that this morning. There's a lot of power in that. For companies that have multiple entities, group reporting. This is something that's going to extend to that principle with consolidation. So you're going to be able to reduce manual effort of aggregating multiple entities and giving your leaders a consolidated view without waiting for all of your subsidiaries to finish their processes. So that group reporting will allow you to see that live view across multiple entities to make those better decisions. So what's the broader impact of all of this? I would ask myself, right? Finance shifts from a function that produces historical reports to one that is providing current reports. This is where we are at today, and there's power in that. This changes your relationship with the business. You're becoming more of a partner in decisions and not a supplier of this is what happened after it already had happened. You're helping decisions throughout the business, whether that's in finance or even operations, make these decisions faster and more efficiently. So with that being said, we're going to hop into a live demo. Alex Waddell is going to take over, and he's going to be the presenter for an advanced close functions to show you guys what that looks like in Cloud ERP today.
Thanks, Nikhil. So you should all be seeing the financial close overview dashboard. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes. This is really just a teaser, but there is not a lot of complexity to financial close. This is a bolt-on that runs seamlessly inside S4, and you have a lot of control over how you configure it. So first of all, what advanced close is not, it's not financial consolidation. So you heard maybe group reporting in the previous slides. While you can interact with tasks that are involved with your financial consolidation, this is really just a task management tool. So anybody who's in accounting finance has used this tool, but 90% of us have just been doing it in Excel. So it's really our checklist of all the things that need to happen at the end of the month. But where it's a lot more powerful than Excel is because it's tied directly into the tasks. So you can automate some of that. You can track who's responsible for things. You can interact with other users. And it's all auditable and highly configurable. So this is sort of a landing page where either a task owner or maybe a task supervisor would kind of spend part of their month monitoring how far along are we with the financial close. So you can see here I'm just fixated on a specific period 2 of 2026. You can have multiple task lists, and these information panels are kind of customizable. So you can see down here, there's one that relates to custom fields. So somebody has come along and they've actually ranked tasks with their own categorizations that are really workstream related, like procure to pay and record to report. So you have a lot of control over what you want to see on this screen, but ultimately this donut is what you're kind of monitoring. So you want this ring to close within a certain timeline. This is my demo environment, so nobody's really doing tasks. So everything here is actually overdue, but that's fine. And then the only other place you're really working in as a user is the actual task list. So this is where you would spend most of your time. So once again, you get a little bit of a dashboard up here. So this allows you to kind of monitor where are we at with different tasks. So we can see that there are some items that are completed without error. I can click on the blue bar if I want to just highlight a certain area, and I can keep adding items onto this list as well. So if you prefer not to work with, if you want more of a list view, you can do that. You can just click on the grid here, and then you get your pure list, and you can work with specifically with the filters at the top. So a lot of flexibility with how you decide to interact with this. Now, when it comes to actually looking at your specific tasks, where do they come from? How are they created? So everything in this list that we're looking at here is potentially connected to another item. So if we look at something that's completed, like a depreciation posting run completed without errors by Avery Powell, Avery would have worked inside this specific task. And there's all the information about this task, essentially where to go to run it. Are there dependencies? So here's where we can manage that. Well, before we can do the depreciation run, asset balances have to happen. We have to execute a settlement for assets under construction. And because those green boxes are checked, we know those tasks happened. And so now that this task is complete, we know we can move along to the task, which is close GL, manage posting periods for fixed assets. So it just really gives that both the user and the administrator sort of governance over when did these tasks happen and have all the dependencies been completed. And as they go through those tasks, they are just going to simply flag them. So are they in process? So this is how you're notifying the controller or whomever is going to be administrating the overall dashboard, where we're at with these tasks, where we've run into an issue. In some cases, maybe we need to send an email, we need to do a communication to another person because we're having a problem with this. So all of that can be recorded in here. If this task had to do with maybe running a specific job and creating some sort of output, that attachment can be linked here. So it becomes kind of that full system for communicating with your leadership on where you're at with the task. So at a very high level, that's how you interact with it. There's obviously a lot more to it than that. The other thing I'll show you just under the dashboard really quickly. So there's a few different applications that are involved in setting up your advanced financial close, but at a high level, what it's really run on is a task list, which can be driven by templates. And so here I have a sample task list open, and you have the ability to create tasks as an administrator. And so a task doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a specific job in S4. It could be maybe you need to print a balance sheet and send it to the bank as of a certain date. So that can be literally a task you add as a reminder, and it has a dependency on something else. So really you have full control over what you want to track, whether it's something tied to a job that happens in the system, whether it's something that has to be done externally. You get to manage that in here, and then you will keep a sort of history forever of when those tasks were done and whom completed them. So that concludes my little teaser. I'll pass it back to Nikhil, and feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A or the chat, and we can answer them.
Thanks, Alex. Let's go ahead and get back to where we left off. So after covering the advanced financial close, we're going to start dipping our toes now into where AI is starting to drive value for your finance organizations in Cloud ERP. So with that being said, we're getting to the cutting edge stuff. So there's a lot of AI in our news and our feeds today. So I need to be very deliberate about like what SAP's approach to AI will be moving forward. So AI and SAP Cloud, what this is going to be is not just a separate layer like we talked about earlier. It's going to be something that's embedded in how your system is running every single one of your transactions. It's at the core. So what that means is because that value is now in your AI, finance is almost entirely dependent on the data and the quality of the data access. So finance can start leveraging things a lot faster and cleaner because you have those base layers of processes that we talked about in the first half of this presentation. What I think is interesting when we start talking about AI is when Oxford Economics, they went out and surveyed 1,600 executives that are leveraging SAP tools today. And what they found was that organizations are averaging a 16 to 17% return on their AI investments today. They expect that to nearly double within the next 2 years. The reason for that is because finance is one of those few areas where the returns are very concrete. The use cases are all well defined. How do we better forecast our cash? How do we close faster? How do we detect anomalies faster? And how do we reduce manual work? These are all areas where AI is very, very strong at. So we're going to go through what those 4 specific use cases look like, and how you can start leveraging them in your organization today with Cloud ERP. So the first one's going to be predictive cash flow. So cash flow forecasting is probably one of the most universally painful processes in finance. So the traditional approach, you have to pull your data from your AR, you have to pull your AP data, your payroll data, and you have to put all this into a treasury into a model. Usually this model is Excel for a lot of businesses that I've worked with. So that is not only just time consuming, but it's very backwards looking. So you guys are starting to probably see a trend here on what we're talking about when it says backwards looking and manual reporting, because by the time your forecast is ready, some of those inputs might already be dated. Where predictive cash flow is going to start helping your business is it leverages machine learning trained on your actual history within your environment, your payment patterns, your customers' behaviors, your seasonal trends. All of this starts to generate for you a forward-looking cash position. This is across your short and your midterm time horizons. So this solution will continuously learn, and it's going to continue to improve and provide you better forecasts in terms of your cash flow. So what this means is you're having a practical shift, is you're becoming more from a reactive organization to a proactive organization. So instead of figuring out, you have a liquidity issue already when it's happening to you, you're giving the insight now to be able to see this forming for weeks and giving you the ability to act. Whether that's, adjusting payment terms or drawing on credit or even adjusting some of your supplier payments outgoing. This is all things that enables your business to make impactful decisions in a proactive way rather than a reactive. So your treasury is now working on things that have lead times and differences that become more of a planned response, that you guys have all of the balls in your court, to less of a crisis response. And because again, all of this is embedded in the same system with your actuals, there's no data prep, there's no export or a separate tool, there's no old data. It's reports and data that you can leverage today instantaneously within your system. So now this is going to bring me to the conversation on Joule. So Joule is SAP's AI co-pilot, very similar to your Claudes, your co-pilots, your chat GPTs. It's worth being deliberate here as well on how this will change the day in life for your finance users, because conversational AI, it's a broad term. So the practical problem that Joule is solving is one of 2 things: navigation, ease of use. So if we're on SAP products today, you guys are probably very well aware it's very deep solution. It can handle a lot of what your business can do. But with that depth, sometimes it makes it hard for users to find what they need to find, especially users that might be onboarded into our organizations from a new job. So think about your finance analyst who needs to understand, hey, why is this cost center going over budget, and needs to know what report they need to run, how to filter it, and how to interpret the data. So this is all things that will slow down people into getting the data they need to make the decisions they need to make that's impacting to your organization. So where Joule is going to start helping your finance users is that they can just ask questions in plain language and get an answer on what that looks like, all grounded in your financial data. So this is based, again, on their permissions. So they won't be able to ask things to Joule that they don't have the permission to see. What this will allow you to do is cut your times drastically on where your resources are spending time. And again, less data preparation, more data analysis. So currently, SAP has deployed over 100 Joule use cases internally, and they are seeing, measurable productivity gains, and early adopting organizations are saying, hey, dispute resolution cycle times cut nearly in half. It doesn't stop there though. Moving into 2026, SAP and AI, this is a constantly evolving topic. So in 2026, SAP has started that evolution from where Joule is turning from a co-pilot into an agent. And what that means for your organization is it gives you guys the ability to create agents that can initiate and complete tasks for you, not just answer your questions. So for your finance teams, what that could mean is, an agent can identify anomalies in your data. It can identify why and the root cause for that anomaly. It can then propose journal entries to you and eventually route it to you for approval, all without someone having to do something manually to get to that point. So there's a lot of power. There's a lot of value that can drive for organizations. So again, your users aren't spending time data prepping and then having to dig into issues and figuring out what is causing the underlying features and functions. The AI agent will be able to run for you and provide this data and then give it to you for review and approval before executing. Asset accounting is just another one of those areas, right? That tend to generate a lot of issues towards month end. You're running depreciations, you're making adjustments. There's having to be reconciliations between what your sub ledger is and what the general ledger is, and then you're having to do post close corrections. So for capital intensive organizations, this is probably one of your biggest sources of delay when you're closing. So what SAP's done here is that they've given us AI capabilities that focus on three things: detecting anomalies that flag unusual depreciations or valuation entries before they hit the close. They give you intelligent validation that catches and compliance issues in real time rather than after the fact. And because asset accounting is embedded in the Universal Journal, all of these values are available and visible to you as a leader in the same analytics functions throughout the business. So for organizations managing large assets, portfolios, manufacturers, real estate, infrastructure, this is all to help start supporting better capital decisions. When you have visibility into how your assets are being utilized, the asset values alongside all of your financial performances, the conversation is changing again to about capital allocation and becomes much more grounded in where you guys are as an organization today. So again, if we're catching any types of recurring themes here, it's real-time decision making, accurate analytics, and improved and reduced cycle times to complete tasks and automation where needed. And last but not least, the use case I want to highlight here is your Joule allocation runs. And this one doesn't get talked about a lot. It probably should. What we see a lot is cost and revenue allocations are often some of the most complex parts of a business, and it's also very manual. So logic can be very complex in your business, whether you're allocating shared services across multiple cost centers, you're distributing overhead by product lines, or you're even handling intercompany allocations across entities. But what's the problem is when something's wrong with any of these allocations, it takes time to figure out what's wrong and why it happened. And that's, again, time not well spent. So where Joule can come in is Joule can help automate that logic execution. It can apply your allocation rules automatically and consistently across all of your entities, periods, and dimensions that you choose. So that consistency benefit matters just as much as that speed benefit, because we are all human. We all make mistakes, and sometimes digging into those mistakes will take us more time than we probably would hope. So that is probably your biggest source for your post-close correction issues is human error. So embedded AI also surfaces exceptions early. So if there's an allocation process that provides you guys an unusual outcome, you will see it before the books close, not after. Again, all of this is coming to the users for review, for approval, giving you notifications if things look out of whack. And that outcome for finance is obviously, again, you get the faster close, you have fewer corrections to make, and better profitability insight. Because allocation accuracy is directly affecting how you are reading your costs and your margin data. So it's that time of the demo again. Going to hand it over to Alex. Alex is going to walk us through the predictive cash flow AI tool that S4 offers out of the box and give you guys an idea of what that looks like.
All right, so I've once again in an SAP demo environment, so lots of big dollars on my screen. This is the cash flow analyzer. So really this is cash flow forecasting based on events that the system is predicting that are going to happen. So this is real time events, including, checks that are expected to clear the bank, um, purchase orders based on delivery dates, sales orders based on manufacturing dates, things like that. So in this particular one, lots of different ways to run this. I've chosen to run this across 3 different legal entities. Because I haven't specified a currency, it's giving me all the native currencies. And so, of course, across these 3 legal entities, I can have more than one currency. So multiple bank accounts across my companies, which in this case are Germany, the US, and the UK. If I want something that's more consistent, I could specify that I want to just translate this based on estimated rates for my US currency. And now I'm going to see something like this. So I can keep expanding on these. It is up to me to decide how I want this roll up to occur. So right now I'm rolling it up by currency, by legal entity, and then essentially by a planning item that rolls into a potential bank account, or potentially we don't know where the bank account is because maybe this is a purchase order or something like that. We don't ultimately know where it's going to be paid. So whenever it says not assigned, that's not really a critical factor. It does mean that we are going to be subject to that cash flow. So when I get down to that lowest level, which is my planning level, you can see here that I've got green and red arrows. So anything that is green is obviously inbound cash. Anything that's red is outbound. And this is my expected dates. So I'm looking over a 7-day horizon. So that's pretty immediate. And you see in my demo environment, they have bots that create lots of transactions, but nobody ever actually does a check run. So everything looks like it's overdue. In your environment, this would obviously be much more staggered across meaningful periods. Now, if you wanted to look at a longer time frame, you could say, well, I want to look at maybe over 4 weeks. You could just put in W4 and it's going to do the same thing. I can expand all the way to the bottom with a couple clicks here. And now I'm looking at a horizon of 18, week 19, 20, 21. Maybe I want to do something like M3, and I can even do M3 plus W3, so I can go 3 months and 3 weeks. So you can get pretty creative there with your time dimension, how you want to focus that. And so now we are looking at April, May, and June, so the next 3 months, and then the following 3 weeks after that. So, I mean, a lot of flexibility in how you do this forecasting. Obviously, the further out in time that you go, potentially the less accurate, because this is based on real events like your actual purchase orders, actual sales orders in the system. So depending on the nature of your business, you would have a good idea of how far out you can forecast. But one other thing that I will mention is you can also create your own sort of planning events in the system. So those are essentially credit debit transactions that you can do on the treasury side. So these aren't real journal entries. These are just expected cash flow events. So if you knew that you were going to have maybe an infusion of cash from shareholders or something like that, you could book that into the system, and that would also show up on your forecast. So that would give you more accurate data. And then once that real event happens, that sort of treasury event would get converted into a journal entry and would be replaced by the real actual cash movement. So that is just my little quick 2-minute teaser into the cash flow analyzer. I will mention, though, that this predictive accounting does also feed into even a predictive income statement that you can run in the system. So it's very powerful in the way that SAP is kind of isolating these, and they're putting them in a specific ledger that is a commitment ledger. So it's kind of doing futuristic journal entries that are completely changeable if you decide to cancel the purchase order or the customer decides to cancel the sales order. Then it will just update that predictive accounting based on all those transactions. So once again, if there's any questions, feel free to, I guess, drop them in the chat and I'll hand us back.
Thanks, Alex. Alrighty. So we're getting towards the tail end of our presentation here. So I want to take a moment here to kind of bring together everything that we've walked through today and how that impacts and what it means for you as a finance organization. So the combined effect of your unified data models, automated close, live analytics, and AI on top of all of that is executing and surfacing insights for your business faster. It's a finance function that makes you operate completely differently than how you're operating today. And it's not just always about being faster at the things you do today, but different on how you're spending your time on more meaningful decisions. So finance transformations have been at the top priority for CFOs for over the last 2 consecutive years, according to research. So the organizations are moving on this now, and they're doing it because there's a gap between what they have today and what is possible out in the market. And that gap continues to widen as technology continues to evolve. So close faster, see data sooner, spend more time on analysis and review and business outcomes. Less time on reconciliations, data chasing, and manual manipulations. This is where Cloud ERP Public is thriving in today's market. So with that being said, guys, it brings us to the tail end of our sessions. We're going to turn it over for a few minutes here. I know we're running short on time. If there's any open questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. Again, if we don't have time to go through all of your questions, we'll make sure we get them answered for you and distributed to you after the session close. So I'm going to take a beat here. Are there any questions that need to be dropped in? Any questions you guys might have? Otherwise, we'll move on to next steps.
I just wanted to hop in one of the questions that have been asked. Will you be sharing the slide deck after this meeting? The slide deck itself won't be shared, but the recording of the meeting, of the webinar, will be shared with everyone here who attends. And tomorrow we'll also be sending like a summary of the whole month, which was regarding the application segment of the webinar series, mainly for SAP Cloud ERP Public in finance and supply chain.
Awesome. Thanks, Risto. Okay, well, if you didn't drop a question in the chat today, what I'm going to prompt you guys to is, thank you all for your time. We appreciate your time spent with us today. Like I said, I know times and calendars don't let up easy. And if you want to continue this conversation, whether that's the deeper capability of what Cloud ERP Public can offer your organization, a discussion about what you're currently doing today, or you just want to follow up on some of these previous sessions we talked about earlier, and like Risto mentioned, feel free to reach out to us using the QR codes and the details below. And obviously, if you guys want to reach out to myself and to Alex for personal questions, we have our LinkedIn profiles that we shared at the beginning of the session. So again, thank you all for your time today, and looking forward to chatting with you guys in the future. Thanks.